A girl from a small town went out trick-or-treating on Halloween and vanished without a trace. The case immediately grabbed national attention, and over the next few days, more than 5,000 people joined the search. But despite the massive investigation, police couldn't solve the mystery, until they stumbled onto a completely unexpected twist that finally revealed what happened. And the truth shocked everyone. Lisa Ann French was born on June 2, 1964, in Wisconsin. When she was young, her parents got divorced, and she moved with her mom to the small town of Fond du Lac. A few years later, her mom remarried, and Lisa became a big sister to a younger brother. By 1973, Lisa was 9 years old, a typical kid attending her local elementary school, active in the Girl Scouts, and spending most of her free time playing outside with friends. That October, Lisa was buzzing with excitement about Halloween, or, more specifically, about collecting as much candy as possible from the neighbors. She had originally planned to dress as a butterfly, but the late October weather turned chilly, forcing her mom to improvise. She pieced together a last-minute costume using clothes from around the house, including an oversized black hat, and sent Lisa out to trick-or-treat. Lisa had planned to go out trick-or-treating with a friend, but that evening, the friend got grounded and had to stay home. So, Lisa set out alone. Though her mom warned her not to stray too far from their house, their neighborhood was considered safe, and Lisa's parents knew everyone within a several-block radius. Plus, other kids and parents were out that night, so her mom wasn't too worried. Lisa was also looking forward to a Halloween party thrown by neighborhood parents. That year, news reports had sparked panic across the country about candy tampering, stories of hidden razor blades, and even poison in treats. To ease fears, the community decided to host a controlled, safe environment for the kids. Lisa left home around 6 p.m., promising to return by 7 o'clock. But when she didn't come back, her mom started to worry. At first, she figured Lisa had gotten carried away trying to collect as much candy as possible. But when the clock hit 8 p.m., she decided to go look for herself. She combed the nearby streets, but there was no sign of her daughter. Frantic, she asked everyone she passed if they had seen Lisa. Word of the disappearance spread fast through the neighborhood, and soon, some neighbors joined the search. But no one could find a trace of her. Eventually, her mom decided to call the police. Officers swarmed the area, and soon, dozens of people were out searching, with the crowd growing by the hour. Investigators learned Lisa had only stopped at 2 houses that night, a classmate's and a teacher's. After that, she simply disappeared. This only deepened the fear. Both homes were just minutes from her own, meaning something could have happened almost immediately after she left. The search lasted all night, but turned up nothing. By morning, even more locals joined the effort, and police expanded the hunt citywide. Soon, national news picked up the story. For many, Halloween was supposed to be fun, a night of kids laughing and collecting candy, just like Lisa. Now, her disappearance felt like a collective nightmare, and thousands wanted answers. The second day of searching turned up nothing, but police weren't ready to give up. They printed thousands of flyers with Lisa's photo, and volunteers plastered them across the town and beyond. Local gas stations even offered free gas to search volunteers, whose numbers eventually swelled to over 5,000 people. They combed every street, forest, field, and river, anywhere Lisa might be. Volunteers on horseback and ATVs scoured remote areas. But no one could find her. Days passed, until a call came in on November 3rd, 3 days after Lisa vanished. A farmer driving through the small town of Taycheedah, just 3 miles from Lisa's home, spotted 2 trash bags by the roadside. Like everyone else, he'd heard about the missing girl, so he decided to check the bags, just in case. What he found horrified him. Inside one bag was Lisa's body. The other held her clothes. The farmer rushed to the nearest phone and called the police. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. By the time officers arrived, dozens of locals had gathered at the scene, all in shock over the grim find. Investigators confirmed the body was Lisa's and sent it to the medical examiner, who established she'd been assaulted. Initially, they thought the cause of death was strangulation, but later determined she'd actually died from shock. Back in 1973, DNA testing wasn't a thing yet, so detectives had to rely on whatever physical evidence they could find. Forensics went through all of Lisa's clothes, picking up stray fibers that seemed out of place. They also found a single hair. But there wasn't a single fingerprint, not on her clothes, not on her body, And not even on the trash bags the killer used to dump her remains. News of the brutal murder didn't just shake their small town, it spread across the whole country. People were outraged, demanding the police catch the killer as soon as possible. Parents were terrified and scared for their own kids' safety. Lisa's funeral took place 3 days after her body was found. Thousands of people showed up for the service, so many that the organizers had to set up multiple lines just to let everyone say their goodbyes. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything they could to track down the killer. With no solid leads, they focused on retracing Lisa's steps that night. 2 families told investigators she'd stopped by their houses for candy, and after that, she just vanished. That meant something had to have happened almost immediately after she left the second house. From there, investigators considered 2 possibilities. Either a stranger saw Lisa outside and lured her away, or she knocked on another door for candy, and someone who lived there attacked her. The first theory didn't seem likely. Lisa wasn't the kind of kid to go off with a stranger or hop into a random car. And none of the neighbors reported hearing screams or seeing anything suspicious. That made the second theory seem much more likely. Investigators went door to door, questioning everyone on the street. There were dozens of houses, but every single resident claimed Lisa hadn't stopped by. With no immediate leads, detectives started looking closer at each household, trying to narrow down possible suspects. They ruled out houses where only women were present and also eliminated the ones Lisa had already passed before visiting her teacher and classmate. They also knew Lisa had only been knocking on doors of families she knew well. She was familiar with most of her neighbors but wasn't close with all of them. So, the police asked her mom who else on that street Lisa might have felt comfortable visiting. She gave them a few names, but one in particular stood out. A little further down the street lived a 24-year-old man named Gerald Turner. He shared a home with his girlfriend and their young daughter. There were several reasons why Turner caught the police's attention. First, Lisa knew him well. He and his family had previously lived in a duplex with Lisa's family, right on the other side of the wall. Their families interacted all the time, and Lisa often ran over to play with his daughter. She also talked to Turner himself quite a bit. She would excitedly bring him new things her parents had bought for her, and he always seemed happy to listen. The second reason had to do with his behavior. When police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, he didn't show any obvious signs of guilt, but something about his responses felt off. The detectives couldn't put their finger on it, but his answers just didn't sit right with them. The third reason came to light a little later. Investigators had a pretty clear timeline of when Lisa was attacked, just minutes after she left the last house. And during that exact window, Turner was home alone. His girlfriend and their kid were at a Halloween party, which meant he had the perfect opportunity to commit the crime before they got back. With all this information, Turner seemed like the most likely suspect out of everyone on that street. But proving his guilt was a whole different story. Police questioned him multiple times, but he kept denying any involvement. Eventually, they asked if he'd take a polygraph test, and Turner agreed. During the test, the examiner flagged some of his answers to key questions as inconclusive. Detectives tried to use that to pressure him into confessing, but he wouldn't budge. Later, they asked him to take another test. This time, he flat out refused. With no confession, investigators turned back to the limited physical evidence they had. As we know, forensic experts had found a few stray fibers on Lisa's body and clothing, along with a single human hair. After analyzing it, they concluded the hair most likely wasn't from someone's head, it was from the killer's body. So, police obtained a warrant to search Turner's house and collect hair samples from him. In his bedroom, they immediately took note of the bedspread because it was the same color as the stray fibers found on Lisa's clothing. When forensic experts examined it more closely, they confirmed that the fibers could have come from this blanket, but proving it with absolute certainty just wasn't possible. The hair sample was another frustrating piece of evidence. It matched in color, but without DNA testing, there was no way to prove a definitive match. Still, these findings only deepened their suspicions. Investigators kept pressing Turner, showing up at his house, bringing him in for questioning. But no matter how many times they confronted him, he stuck to his story. He swore he had nothing to do with Lisa's murder. This dragged on for months. And for Lisa's family, it was pure agony. Not only had they suffered an unimaginable loss, but they also had to live with the torment of not knowing who had taken her life. To make things even harder, Lisa's mother was in the early stages of pregnancy at the time of the murder. She was grieving her daughter while also trying to prepare for the arrival of another child. Since Turner continued to deny any involvement, detectives decided to speak with his girlfriend and ask for a more detailed account of that night. She told them that she and her daughter had gone to a Halloween party and returned home around 7:15 p.m. When she walked in, she saw Gerald lying on the couch in his bathrobe. Right away, he told her he wasn't feeling well and just needed to rest. As she sat in the living room, he kept getting up and going to the bedroom, lying down for a moment. Then, coming back out just as quickly each time. He told her not to disturb him and insisted he needed to rest. She found it a little odd but assumed he really was sick. A short while later, she and her daughter left again to visit her mother. This only added to the police's suspicions about Turner, but they still had no solid proof. That was the case until August 8, 1974, when he was brought in for yet another interrogation. This time, 9 months after the murder, something changed. Turner suddenly decided to confess and finally told detectives what really happened that night. According to Turner, Lisa had indeed come to his house for candy, and he invited her inside. At that moment, his girlfriend and daughter were still at the Halloween party. From the very first second, he had one thing in mind: assaulting Lisa. So, he took her to the bedroom and committed the crime. Afterward, he realized Lisa wasn't showing any signs of life. He panicked, claiming he never meant to kill her. Turner tried to revive her, but right then, he heard his girlfriend and daughter pulling up outside. Thinking fast, he moved Lisa's body from the bed to the bathroom connected to the bedroom. Then, he went out to the living room and lay down on the couch. As soon as his girlfriend walked in, he told her he wasn't feeling well and asked her not to bother him. Turner then went to the bedroom, hoping she wouldn't follow him, but he couldn't sit still. He was terrified that at any moment, she'd walk in and see what he had done. That's why he kept going back to the living room every few minutes. He knew that if his girlfriend decided to use the bathroom, she'd immediately see Lisa's body, and he was doing everything he could to prevent that. Soon after, his girlfriend left to visit her mother, and Turner started figuring out how to get rid of Lisa's body. He pulled socks over his hands to avoid leaving fingerprints, grabbed 2 trash bags, and stuffed Lisa's body along with her belongings inside. He then carried everything out to his car and drove to a nearby town. There, he dumped the bags by the side of the road and headed back home. By the time Lisa's family and neighbors began searching for her, Turner had already covered his tracks. Turner's confession shocked not just Lisa's family and the town's residents but even the investigators themselves. For 9 months, they couldn't charge him because the circumstantial evidence simply wasn't enough. But then, out of nowhere, he decided to confess in vivid detail. Most importantly, he gave the police information that no innocent person could have possibly known. After his confession, Turner was arrested, and the prosecution began preparing for trial. It started just a few months later, but the prosecutor faced an unexpected problem. Right before the trial began, Turner recanted his confession. He claimed the police had written it themselves and that he had only signed it because he was exhausted from their constant pressure and harassment. Despite this, there was little doubt about his guilt. Even his ex-girlfriend, who had no idea what had happened at the time, apparently believed he was responsible and testified against him in court. The prosecution also pointed to the fibers found on Lisa's clothing. They matched the bedspread in Turner's bedroom, the very place where he'd taken Lisa. But the strongest piece of evidence was still his confession. It contained far too many specific details to be fabricated. In the end, Turner was found guilty and sentenced to 38 to 82 years in prison. But his story didn't end there. Despite the horrific nature of his crime, Turner was released early for good behavior. He walked free in 1992 after serving just 17 years behind bars. However, he wasn't released straight back into society. Instead, he was placed in a halfway house, a transitional facility where former inmates live under regular supervision as they adjust to life outside prison. These homes are designed to help with reintegration, offering structure, support, and strict rules to reduce the risk of reoffending. Still, Turner's release sparked massive outrage. Lisa's family was devastated, and the people of Milwaukee, where Turner was relocated, were furious. The idea of such a dangerous criminal living in their community was unacceptable, so residents demanded that authorities remove him immediately. Soon, city and state officials joined the public outcry. While they didn't have the power to forcibly evict Turner, They began pressuring the correction system to overturn the decision and get him out of Milwaukee. A year after Turner was released, the correction system finally decided to send him back to prison. Their investigation revealed that the parole board had made a mistake. Turner was never supposed to be eligible for early release in the first place. Around the same time, state officials began working on a new law to prevent dangerous criminals like Turner from ever being released again. The law proposed that individuals convicted of sexual assaults who posed a high risk of reoffending wouldn't be sent back into society after serving their time. Instead, they'd be transferred to secure medical facilities and held there until doctors determined they were no longer a threat to others. This law, named after Turner himself, was passed in 1994. Authorities hoped it would block any future attempts by Turner to gain his freedom. But just a few years later, they were hit with another setback. In 1998, Turner once again applied for early release. To everyone's disbelief, the parole board refused to classify him as a dangerous sexual offender, even despite damning testimony during the hearing from Turner's ex-wife and several former girlfriends. Each of them shared similar stories. They said Turner had repeatedly abused them when they refused his advances. But even with these overwhelming testimonies, the board still wasn't convinced. In the end, Turner didn't fall under his own law and was released once again. He moved back into a halfway house, and a few months later, he nearly attacked a parole officer with a knife during a routine check. But even after that, Turner was allowed to remain free. The following year, Turner filed a lawsuit against a waste management company that had refused to hire him. At the time, he was living in Wisconsin, where laws prohibited employers from denying someone a job based solely on their criminal record. Shockingly, the court ruled in Turner's favor, and he was awarded an undisclosed amount of money from the company. This continued until 2003. Turner was still living in a halfway house, with law enforcement regularly checking in on him. During one of these routine visits, officers discovered a massive collection of disturbing adult photos and videos on Turner's computer. They also found out he had been watching 3 movies about serial killers. Under the terms of his parole, Turner was strictly prohibited from possessing or viewing any such materials. As a result, he was immediately arrested, and the judge decided to send him back to prison for 15 years. Lisa's family thought this would finally be the end, that Turner would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But once again, they faced another devastating twist. The parole board refused to extend his sentence, and Turner was scheduled for release in 2018. Lisa's mother refused to accept that Turner might walk free again. She launched a petition demanding to keep him behind bars. The petition quickly gathered thousands of signatures and drew nationwide attention from people who didn't want such a dangerous criminal back in society. Local and state authorities also backed the movement, and together, they began working to overturn the decision regarding his release. This time, they once again invoked the law named after Turner, arguing that he should be transferred to a secure psychiatric facility instead of being set free. Naturally, Turner fought back, hiring lawyers to challenge the decision, and the legal battle dragged on for several years. Finally, in 2022, a judge made the final ruling. Turner did fall under the law that bore his name. The court determined that he posed a threat to others, and instead of being released, he was sent to a secure psychiatric facility. But even after this ruling, Turner's lawyers filed an appeal and are still fighting to overturn the decision to this day. As of now, Turner is 75 years old and remains in a psychiatric facility. But despite his age, opponents of his release firmly believe he is still a threat and argue that he should never be allowed back into society under any circumstances. It's also worth noting that while Turner has refused to directly admit his guilt, he has made several indirect but convincing confessions over the years. During his initial trial, right before sentencing, he walked past Lisa's mother and quietly said, "I didn't mean to do it." At one point during his time in prison, Turner even wrote a letter addressed to Lisa herself, apologizing and admitting that he had killed her. There was another moment when he let his guilt slip. Turner once said that if he hadn't committed the crime on Halloween, it wouldn't have gotten so much attention from the public and the media, and no one would have cared. Because of all this, Lisa's family knows their fight isn't over. They'll keep battling to make sure Turner never walks free again. And given his history, this latest attempt to get released probably won't be his last. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.